Topic of my report is so grim, frankly, but it happens that today is one of the great days that our class celebrates in history. Victory Day, as it's called in the former Soviet Union and throughout much of Europe. The day the armistice, the final armistice ending World War II in Europe was signed 10 days after the Red Army entered Berlin. And at the cost of 20 million plus lives of the Soviet people, at the cost of untold sacrifices by the partisan working class of Europe to overthrow Hitler and end the scourge of Nazism. And we salute those comrades who fought then, and we salute the comrades who are fighting the resurgence of fascism now, and we want the world to know that Workers' World Party stands with them. Today in Russia and in the areas of southeastern Ukraine that are asserting their independence and autonomy, such as Crimea, which is now part of Russia, and in the People's Republic of Donetsk, some of the largest Victory Day actions since the collapse of the Soviet Union more than 20 years ago were held. Just as last week on May Day, by far the largest actions throughout the former Soviet Union since that time were held. And the basis of those, though reported in the media here as being examples of Russian patriotism or Russian nationalism, actually signal a resurgence of anti-fascist consciousness and what I would call Soviet patriotism, particularly between Russian and Ukrainian workers, and solidarity from the Russian working class towards their Ukrainian sisters and brothers in their current struggle. And that could be seen in the fact that the Russian capitalist government, which up till now has tried in many different ways to repress or just wipe away the memory of May Day and Victory Day, this year brought them back at Red Square in a major way, and with this, and in response to the anti-fascist struggle in Ukraine and the pressure that they're feeling from the working class. That doesn't mean there was a break in the struggle today. In Mariupol, in Donetsk, although there are very conflicting reports about the numbers of casualties, we do know that the Ukrainian military, and I'll talk more about what that actually is in a minute, opened fire on civilians at a Victory Day march. Reports are between 20 and 100 civilians killed. 20 is what the Ukrainian coup regime is reporting was the number of casualties of so-called Russian separatists, as they call the anti-fascists. Doctors who were polled, I guess, by RT or some other service, said they thought there might be up to 100 dead and many more wounded. We'll find out more about that in the coming days. In another city, the mayor, who was appointed by the coup government, had an event which was not a Victory Day event, but actually had an event praising Hitler as the liberator of Ukraine, and denouncing Stalin as the dictator and the murderer of Ukrainians. However, in Kiev, in the capital of the coup, interestingly, despite a ban on the St. George's ribbon, or the ribbon of valor, as it was called in Soviet times, which has become the anti-fascist symbol in Ukraine, people still came out to the Eternal Flame, which was the memorial for the Soviet soldiers who died in World War II. these two jokers, Yatsenyuk and Turchinov, the prime minister and president appointed by the U.S., basically, showed up at this Victory Day event wearing red carnations and trying to talk to the veterans who were gathered there. And they were booed and heckled and chased away, basically. And that was a great thing. It's kind of funny that they even tried to do that. I don't know what the hell they were thinking, but they got a tiny taste of the response they deserved anyway. So another major thing that we need to pay attention to this weekend is that the referendums on autonomy on Sunday, May 11th, are going forward in Donetsk and Lugansk, the two most militant, organized regions of southeast Ukraine that have taken over most of the city halls and police stations and so on, and are resisting, actively resisting, both as civilians and as militia, the incursion of the Ukrainian military forces that are trying to destroy them and take back those regions. And the leadership there decided to go forward with the referendum, even though Vladimir Putin yesterday publicly asked them basically to postpone it indefinitely. And we don't know, what the Russian government's thinking on doing that was, if they really wanted them to postpone it or not. It's all speculation at this point. But the point is, the people there want to go forward with it, and they are going forward with it, even under the conditions of being surrounded by hostile military forces, having incursions on a regular basis, and having things like the massacre today in Mariupol happening. So in terms of what happened in Odessa, it's sort of personally jarring for me to talk about it. As comrades know, I've been following this issue very closely and have been in regular contact with comrades from Borotba, the union Borotba, which means struggle, which is a left-wing split from the communist youth of several years back that now is leading the anti-fascist struggle in some cities like Odessa and Kharkov, and has a presence throughout the southeast. So I'm in touch with some of these folks every day, and I was actually on a call with comrades and other activists last Friday afternoon talking about the teach-in, organizing the teach-in that we're doing tomorrow, when the news started to come over about what had happened in Odessa and the number of casualties, and my heart just sank because I knew not only was the toll so terrible, but I knew that our comrades in Borotba were in the middle of it, and that was true. They were. What has been happening is a two-pronged strategy by the coup regime in Kiev. On the one hand, to encircle and sort of militarily attack wherever they think they can find a weak point in Donetsk and Lugansk, where the workers are very organized and militant. And in the other cities where the anti-fascist movement is strong, but not at that level yet, like Kharkov and Odessa, and where the left is very strong, to unleash these fascist gangs from the western part of Ukraine to carry out all kinds of provocations. And in fact, about a week before the massacre in Odessa, some of the same folks who carried out that atrocity had attacked a demonstration in Kharkov, following the same MO. Was they were bussed in from western Ukraine, disguised, not really disguised, but their cover was that they were soccer fans coming to attend a match. And I guess the tradition over there is each team has like a parade marching to the stadium, representing their team or whatever. And what they would do is gather up all the right-wing elements locally in these parades, and then bring in from Western Ukraine, bring in these busloads of armed, hardened fascist goons to sort of give leadership to it. And that's what happened in Kharkov. That's what happened, and then that's what happened in Odessa last Friday. And the scale of it, though, was something else. In Odessa, the left has had what I think we could safely sort of compare it to an Occupy encampment. When those were going strong a couple of years ago, at a place called Kuliokov Field, which is a traditional place to hold rallies and demonstrations there. And the first thing that this fascist parade did, they came out near the stadium, took a turn away from the stadium, so the anti-fascists were alerted to know that, what was really going on. About 200 people tried to block them from advancing further. Then the fascists unleashed the weapons, drove the anti-fascist protesters into a shopping center, started lobbing Molotov cocktails and stuff at the shopping center. The police came in to protect the shopping center and pushed the fascists towards Kuliokov Field, where the encampment was. And that's where the real, toll started to take place. They firebombed the encampment and destroyed it. And the comrades and other activists who were there defending the encampment, and they have 24-hour shifts around the clock of people protecting it, had to flee as it burned down. And they found shelter in the trade union house, which was nearby. The workers there opened their doors to them to protect them. Several hundred people ended up taking shelter there anyway. The fascists, and this is all on video, some of you may have seen it, it's been widely released on the internet, often by the fascists themselves, bragging about it. You can see the people in the blue and yellow and in the with the Nazi regalia and the red armbands, which are their sort of symbol of the right sector and those kind of groups, mixing Molotov cocktails, delivering them. They basically, it's obviously a very sexist movement. They had women creating the Molotov cocktails and bringing them up to the men with the arms, and then they were lobbing them into the windows and the door of the trade union building. Created a terrible inferno. Some people were burned to death, but not the majority. The majority were shot or beaten to death after they jumped from high windows to escape. And the official death toll was 46 for that day, most of them from the trade union fire. There are, stories coming out now that the death toll may actually be about double that number. We don't know, but it's an incredible attack on the movement, on the anti-fascist movement, on the communist movement, on the workers' movement, on the unions, standing up to the coup in Kiev, standing up to imperialism. And I just want to, mention, that Odessa is about 1 million people. It's the third largest city in Ukraine. very multinational city, which is something that both has made it hard for the fascists to get a grip on it up to now, and also it's made them hard. It's hard for them to get a grip on it, but it's also really hated by the neo-Nazi movements because of that. It's famous even before the Russian Revolution. It was famous as a resort center, and during Soviet times, people from all over the Soviet Union vacationed there. Workers from all over. The socialist bloc came there. It's also the biggest port on the Black Sea for Ukraine, and port cities also tend to be very multinational. So it's like a real hub. That's the character of the movement. Also, it includes not only people of Ukrainian and Russian nationality, but Turks, Azerbaijanis, Armenians, Jews, Roma and Sinti people, and many more. So getting back for a minute to just talk about some of the people who fell that day in Odessa. One of them, the youngest person identified so far, was a guy named Vadim Papure, who was 17, member of the Communist Party youth organization, Komsomol. He died in falling out the window, like jumping from the window to escape the fire. There was a woman, you may have seen the picture, a pregnant woman who was, we don't know her name yet, but apparently she was a worker at the union office, not involved in the protest at all, but was in a part of the building that was not affected by the fire, but the fascists went in through the window, strangled her, and left her dead on the desk in the office. And she was only found the next day when people came in to take photographs of what had happened. There were 2 members of the regional state council, elected representatives basically, of Odessa. One of them was Alex Albu, who is the local leader in Odessa of Borotba, and has been the very vocal opponent in the regional council of the coup regime. He was wounded. He escaped with a group of others from the fire, but they were beaten with baseball bats and chains as they tried to escape. And he was hospitalized along with 2 other Borotba comrades, one of whom was shot in the stomach but lived. Another member of the regional parliament who was an ally of Borotba was killed. And then a young comrade from Borotba, Andrei Brzezowski, who was, I believe, about 23, 24 years old. He survived the fall from the window of the trade union, but was beaten to death on the ground. His funeral was a couple days ago, and we sent our solidarity and a modest donation to help with the expenses for that. There was something that his mother said at the funeral that I thought was really interesting, which speaks to us in our training in Workers' World Party, and that was that one of the things that Andrei really loved about Odessa was how multinational it was, and that was the thing that the neo-Nazis couldn't stand. That's what his mother said. So that's just to give like a sense of what was lost, and only about, at least what I've seen is that only about 20 of the 46 official casualties have been identified so far. The city coroner is not doing autopsies. Everything's being handled very irregularly. A lot of the survivors were arrested after they left the trade union building. Yeah, it definitely brings to mind the bombing of the Move House. Sorry? Yeah, no, I know, I'm coming to that. But none of the fascists involved have been arrested up to this point, even though many of them are known and their faces are on video and in photographs and so on. In fact, a large contingent of right-wing elements were brought in to Odessa again a couple days ago, and so far have not done anything, but they're there. They're occupying the city. We said in the paper, and it's really true, I believe, that the U.S. imperialism is guilty of the massacre and of unleashing these fascist forces throughout Ukraine. We can look at the evidence just of the last month or so. The so-called anti-terrorist military offensives against Donetsk and Lugansk both started after visits from U.S. officials, like within a day. First, when the CIA director visited secretly, although it didn't stay a secret for long. That offensive got turned back very quickly because they sent in regular Ukrainian troops and police, and most of them surrendered to the popular forces. They didn't want to fire on the population, or they were afraid of the consequences if they did, and they turned over armored vehicles and weapons to the militias. Yeah, it was a really humiliating defeat for Kiev and for Washington when that happened. What happened after that is that the U.S. went in a big, much more organized way to sort of take control of it. And we're still sort of, some of the information on that is still coming out. Vice President Biden visited in late April. Again, within a day, there was a new and much more resilient offensive against the southeast, but just sort of picking around the edges. Like they haven't really tried to hit Slavyansk and Donetsk, where the resistance is strongest. They're picking off civilians at checkpoints around the area and going into some of the smaller cities, like Kramatorsk, and carrying out attacks on civilians, killing, like a dozen here, a dozen there, and today in Mariupol. Simultaneously with the most recent and most serious attack on Slavyansk, and while that was going on, while the world's attention was kind of focused on that, that's when the fascists were sent into Odessa to carry out that atrocity. And our comrades on the ground see very clearly that it's a coordinated attack. These things are being timed to go together. It's a two-pronged approach to intimidate and destroy and break up and divide the anti-fascist movement. The media and the bourgeois response in the U.S. has been deafeningly nothing. Literally, you cannot see any coverage that would indicate that the coup regime was responsible for what happened, that the U.S. had a role in it, even that it was carried out by fascists against anti-fascists. A Reuters report released that day, I recall, didn't even mention that it was the anti-Kiev forces that were killed. they talked about the number of dead, and then they quoted pro-Kiev forces saying, well, the violence is all based on the Russians. So if you would have read the article without knowing anything else, you would think, oh, the Russians carried out this massacre, basically. And there's no sign, as there was before the Iraq War, for example, of a split in the ruling class right now over this. The Democrats, the Republicans, the media are all united in their anti-Russia offensive, in painting this upside-down picture of what's going on in Ukraine, basically attributing all the crimes that the U.S. has been carrying out in Ukraine to the Russian side as a justification for the repression that's going on. There's so much to say, and it's one of the problems I think we've had throughout this whole crisis, is that events are unfolding so quickly that by the time we get it into the paper or even up on the website, things have evolved a great deal. But I want to thank the comrades, the editorial comrades, for doing such a great job of keeping the information updated on the Workers' World website. And even when we're not able to cover all the events in the print edition of the paper, we are able to get up several updates per week, which has been a really great resource for not only for comrades here, but has been a great source of inspiration and resource to the comrades over there, and they appreciate it. Let me just say a few words as I wrap up about our response. Yesterday, about 20 comrades and friends, some from the Russian community and others, held a protest outside the Ukrainian consulate on 49th Street. We were responding to a call for emergency actions that was put out by Butterfield, and there were actions across Europe yesterday, as well as here in New York, I believe in Santiago, Chile, and some other places. We're still finding out all the places that they happened. But that was really important that we sort of made the record on that and showed that solidarity. Tomorrow we have this, what's shaping up to be a really interesting teach-in at Riverside Church. And it's not just about Ukraine. I mean, we're trying to bring in, this is really an effort not only to educate ourselves and mobilize ourselves, but to really orient the movement in New York and nationally about what we see, what an important struggle this is, the struggle to stop a new war against Russia, to stop the fascist terror in Ukraine, and all the consequences that has for the working class here. I was thinking when Larry was talking about how we really need to have a discussion about how we talk about these issues in terms of the low-wage worker struggle and vice versa, because you can boil it down to the bottom line is what the U.S. is trying to do is make Ukraine safe for McDonald's, basically. I mean and impose austerity and extend that even to Russia. And so it's not something it seems a world apart, those two struggles, but if we find the links, we can talk about it. And folks here in the oppressed communities, in the working class communities, understand repression and fascist violence, what it means to be like Trayvon Martin, to be the victim of fascist, racist vigilantism, just as the people in Odessa were. UNAC has called for actions to stop a new war with Russia and in solidarity with Ukraine, and that starting from today through Memorial Day, May 26th, and we're initiating a demonstration here in New York on Memorial Day. You should have the flyer on your seat at Times Square on that Monday. No to fascism in Ukraine, no war with Russia. I hope that comrades get a sense of what the stakes are in Ukraine right now, both in terms of the global struggle, the anti-war struggle, and in terms of what it means for the people who are on the ground fighting there every day, and what we can do to be in solidarity with them and spread the word about their struggle, because it's really the U.S. ruling class at this point that is pushing this forward in a big way. As was revealed by the German newspaper Bild a couple days after the massacre, that in their words, that Kiev is now swarming with CIA and FBI agents who are advising the junta on how to carry out the attack on the southeast. Thank you.